right. Well, I was talking with some friends this week about made-for-TV Christmas movies. Doesn't seem like every year, every streaming app has like 10 new Christmas movies, and they all kind of fit a formula. We decided that they fit into 3 categories depending on who released them. So first you have your Hallmark Christmas movies, and these are fun, if not kind of predictable. Like you have your main character who's living life with some sort of repressed trauma, but they're basically content. And then some sort of like heavenly messenger or random twist of fate tells them that they need to go on this adventure, and they either go back to their small town or to the big city. And on that adventure, they reconnect with an estranged parent. They fall in love with their childhood crush. They resolve all of their trauma, and then it starts to snow. And they realize that what was missing in their life was just Christmas all along. Then you have your Netflix Christmas movies. And so these movies are always set in some sort of made-up Central European country, even though everyone has a British accent. They could also be set in some town that's either vaguely northern US or southern Canada. It's not really clear. There's normally some sort of political topic worked in, like an all-black cast or a queer romance. And then there's a wedding that happens on Christmas Day. That or Kurt Russell plays Santa Claus. Then your final set of made-for-TV Christmas movies are Lifetime Christmas movies. And these share some of the features of the other categories, like there's some unresolved family trauma. There's always a gay character. And then there's also like a really tragic twist, like a car accident, or like the love interest turns out to be the cousin, like the twist of a Lifetime movie. Lifetime Christmas movies are like so dark, we forget it's Christmas for like half the movie. And it's not really relevant anyway. But all 3 of these categories have one thing in common. In fact, all Christmas movies seem to have one thing in common. They drive home this message that at Christmas time, love is in the air, everyone finds love, and love is all you need. And that's fun. I mean, who doesn't love love? But it also feels really cheap. I mean, let's be honest, not everyone does find love at Christmas time. A lot of people are separated or missing someone they love this time of year. There may be loves that have died or loves that just can't be. There may be loves that don't see us for who we are or loves that have gone sour. And yet we still love stories about love. And love is at the heart of the Christmas story in the Bible too. I mean, the part of the Bible that everyone knows is God so loved the world. God so loved the world. But maybe part of what makes love complicated this time of the year and always is that we've morphed it and changed it. I mean, movies like this get in our head with ideas of what love is or what love should be. So let's take a minute and look back at how Jesus said love works. Chris is going to read a story for us real quick, and then we'll dive in.
This is Mark chapter 12, verses 28 through 31. One of the scribes came near and heard them disputing with one another. And seeing that he answered them well, he asked him, "Which commandment is the first of all?" And Jesus answered, "The first is, 'Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. The second is this, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these."
Thank you, Chris. So Jesus says these 2 teachings about love are the greatest commandments of all. Love is at the heart of God's message and dream for humanity. So let's unpack how love works for Jesus here. Because this answer Jesus gives is both very traditional and very unorthodox. It's both the love we see in a Christmas movie and it's something bigger than that. So Jesus starts with love God. He says, "Hear, O Israel, love the Lord is God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength." And again, like Pastor Sarah said in our trailer, the Hebrew word for soul is nephesh, and it literally means, it's working, Pastor Sarah. like between church teaching us Hebrew and COVID teaching us the Greek alphabet, we're gonna be like the most linguistic church in it's like we're in seminary together. So what Jesus says here, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your throat, with all your mind, and with all your strength." In essence, love the Lord your God with the most tender parts of your being. And Jesus didn't make this up. Jesus is actually quoting the Shema. The Shema is found in Deuteronomy, and Deuteronomy is seen by most scholars as a contract between God and God's people. And this is the most important prayer in all of Judaism. "Hear, O Israel, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your throat, with all your mind, and with all your strength. Love the Lord your God with the most tender parts of your being." The rabbis write that the Shema should be the first prayer in the morning and the last prayer at night. It's the prayer of last rites before death. It's the climactic prayer of Yom Kippur and the Jewish Day of Atonement. It's also the first prayer that is whispered in the ear of a Jewish baby. So it's likely that Mary would have whispered the Shema in the ear of baby Jesus. Love the Lord your God with the most tender parts of your being. But Hebrew, like a lot of languages, has multiple words for love. So you know this analogy that we give, like English only has one word for love. So you can love your mother, you can love your partner, I love chocolate. And the word for all of these conversations is love, even though those things are really different. But Hebrew has 3 words for love. So we're going to break in the Surface Hub and do a little language lesson. I'm so excited. Also, if this goes south, I can blame the technology. So the first word that Hebrew has is dode. And the best part of this is it'll actually fix my handwriting. Dode. So dode is like arousal and attraction. In Hebrew, the poem Song of Solomon, the speaker says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for his dode is more delightful than wine." Dode is physical love that lingers in your body. And so to be clear, when Jesus says love your neighbor, he's not saying to dode them. Then there's also raya. We'll add that here. Nope. Maybe? Raya. Raya is like friendship or companionship, like a best friend. In the scriptures, we find raya used to describe relationships between lots of characters. Like King Saul and King David have raya. Raya is like that chosen family feeling between friends, or that moment when you exchange looks with someone you know, and you know like exactly what they're thinking. But the Shema doesn't use dode or raya. The Shema uses a different word. Nope, that's not the word. We couldn't have timed that better. We'll go with my handwriting. The Shema uses Ahava. And Ahava is kind of tricky to define, but it also shows up in the Hebrew scriptures a lot. So for example, in Genesis, we find that Abraham has Ahava for his son Isaac. So there's sort of this like nurturing, protective, parental nature to Ahava. And then we read about King Hiram of Tyre, who has Ahava for King David, and he offers to help his son Solomon build a temple. So there's sort of this admiration, loyalty, alliance element to Ahava. And then we see it again in the book of Esther, where the king of Persia has Ahava for the queen, which is sort of like an affection, respect, partnership component. So it's layered. There's like nurturing, protecting, admiring, loyalty, affection, respect. It's all Ahava. Again, the Song of Solomon says Ahava is as strong as death. Its flashes are flashes of fire. Many waters cannot quench Ahava, neither can floods drown it. So Ahava kind of feels like a Christmas movie. Like these are the moments when friends who had Raya realize that they're more than friends and want to explore that. It's also the point where a couple that thought they were just having this fun, playful dode realize that it's more than just a physical thing, and they actually care for each other. Ahava is also in scenes like when you get the pep talk scene from a parent who really believes in their child's potential unequivocally. Or it's the ways that lovers sacrifice for each other. These are the moments in the plot where everything between two characters changes, and all of a sudden, they are totally bonded. This Ahava love is the core of the Shema that Jesus quotes. Hear, O Israel, you shall Ahava the Lord your God with the most tender parts of your being. And if you think about it, this is actually where the drama of a Christmas movie comes from. Like the falling in love in the snow or by the fireplace is the fun scene. But what the lovers do with that feeling sets the stage for everything that comes after. That feeling becomes an action. And the same is true in the Shema. I said before that the Shema is found in Deuteronomy, which has this treaty between God and God's people. And that's actually really important, because part of that treaty is explaining how God has shown Ahava to God's people and how God continues to show Ahava. Deuteronomy recounts the story of how God chose the Israelites to be God's people because of God's Ahava for their ancestors. There was nothing the Israelites had to do to earn Ahava. God felt Ahava for them. And Deuteronomy also reminds them that God fought for their freedom from Egypt and delivered them to the promised land, all because of God's Ahava. The scriptures use this word, Ahava, to describe how God defends the fatherless, shelters the widow, and welcomes the immigrants. It's always extended to the most marginalized in society. God's Ahava may start as a feeling, but it always leads to an action. It fights, it delivers, it saves. So Ahava is both a feeling, this layered feeling of nurturing, protecting, admiring, loyalty, affection, and respect, but it's also an action of choosing, fighting, delivering, defending, sheltering, and welcoming, especially the most marginalized. And this is movie magic, right? I mean, don't we all love this climactic scene where a lover is so passionate for their beloved that they risk everything for them? I think about movies where someone is chasing someone's flight or their train so they don't leave town, or when someone is scrambling to find the money for the perfect gift or the necessary medical treatment, or when a parent gives up that promotion to stay in the hometown and keep the family together, or when someone decides to sell that family heirloom to donate the money to a cause, or that hero that goes on that epic quest risking life and limb to find a little spark of magic that will save the village. These moments when a lover is choosing, fighting, delivering, defending, sheltering, welcoming, this is the epic Ahava love that God has for us, and that love that Jesus asked us to have for God. Ahava the Lord your God with the most tender parts of your being. Now, when we hear Ahava the Lord your God with the most tender parts of your being, the logical question is, but how do you do that? So Jesus gives the second part, love your neighbor. Love your neighbor, which is really logical. I mean, again, the love becomes an action. And again, Jesus is quoting scripture. This time he quotes Leviticus, which is Leviticus is the handbook for the priests in the temple in ancient Israel. And it's in Leviticus that we find this rule to love your neighbor. But again, the word for love here is ahava. Ahava your neighbor. Nurture, protect, admire, be loyal, have affection, respect, choose, fight for, defend, shelter, and welcome your neighbor, especially the most marginalized. And that's the parallel Jesus is drawing between these two important Jewish teachings on Ahava. If the question is, how do you love your neighbor? The answer is, you Ahava God. And if the question is, how do you Ahava God? You love your neighbor. For Jesus, these two teachings are two sides of the same coin. But here's the kicker. Think of one of these dramatic moments in a Christmas movie where the lovers are like fighting for each other. Whether those lovers are parents and children, or friends falling for each other, or siblings reconnecting, or a couple in a spat, the excitement of the scene comes from the risk the lovers are taking. The risk is really the thing that makes it. I mean, ahava as a feeling is risky enough. There are risks to feeling love. Like in the parental nature of ahava, if you love your kids and you raise them to be successful little independent humans, then someday they'll be successful and independent little humans, and they'll be able to do things without you, and that kind of hurts. And if you think about the companionship or alliance nature of ahava, there's a risk of trust and honesty in lots of personal ways. And then there's sort of this desire and partnership nature that requires vulnerability and tenderness, where you have to be open to letting another person in. The feeling of love alone risks getting hurt, looking foolish, being disappointed, losing stability. But then there's also the action risk to ahava. Sticking your neck out to protect and deliver your loved ones is one thing, but Jesus extends this to all people. He is suggesting that we not only fight for, defend, shelter, and protect those that we know, but also strangers, and to those on the margins, those among us who are orphans, who are widows, who are immigrants, those among us who are BIPOC, AAPI, those who are queer or immunocompromised, those experiencing homelessness. Like, who else can you think of who needs some Ahava? Who needs someone to fight for them? And in doing this, in actually doing the action of Ahava, we risk reputation, financial loss, physical harm, again, stability. And that's kind of romantic too, isn't it? I mean, we love those tableau Christmas scenes where someone has a change of heart. Like when Scrooge is touched by the plight of Tiny Tim, like the iconic images where people put money in a bell ringer's bucket, or the plot twist where someone anonymously gifts the orphanage all the money they need to buy the building. And it's cute, and it's kitschy, and it's certainly part of what Jesus is talking about. But Jesus doesn't just love his followers, and he doesn't just love the people on the margins. He also loves the people who deny him and betray him. The people who the story villainizes, Jesus offers Ahava. So do we do that? I mean, in our list of people we think need a little love, do we include the family members who drive us crazy at Christmas dinner? Or the friends who voted differently than us? Or the people who we've been fighting with for 2 years over mask mandates or vaccines? Or those whose old acquaintances we blocked on Facebook? You know, Christmas movies focus on healing broken relationships with magic snow or a well-timed cup of hot chocolate. But we all know that's not how it works. The healing happens when we risk offering this radical Ahava to those we care about, to those on the margins, and to those who really, really, really piss us off. So this Ahava love goes beyond the love of Christmas movies. This isn't the love at first sight kind of love. It isn't the love of walking in the snow. This isn't the love of breaking into song or sitting by the fire. Those loves are nice, and hopefully you have some of that love in your life. But the scope here is bigger, and it doesn't always happen in a 90-minute movie, and it doesn't always happen this time of year. And yet it does, right? Because this is what Christmas in the Bible is all about. Christmas is again a reminder of God's Ahava. God offers God's self in the most tender form of a baby with a heart, a mind, a throat, and a body. And each year at Advent, we begin to live this story again. If there is any similarity between this story of God's Ahava and a made-for-TV movie, it might be that realization that we need more Christmas in our lives. Because when we realize that what is missing in our world is this Christmas promise of Ahava, then this incarnation of God's love happens in us too. And we get to be the ones that take the risk of offering it to others, to our loved ones, to those on the margins, and to those we often villainize. Now, to be clear, the risk that we're taking here isn't about sacrificing your mental health or your body to fix every broken relationship in your life or every societal injustice in the world. There's really no good news in that. But I think there are two risks for us to consider today. What is the risk of feeling Ahava that we need this 2021 Advent season? And what is the risk of doing Ahava that we need this 2021 Advent season? And I think the one question leads to the other. We start with the feeling. What are the relationships we feel the need to take a risk in? What are the conversations we feel the need to take a risk in having? What is the risk we've been avoiding? And then the action. What are the ways we're going to risk showing this feeling? What are the words we're going to risk saying? What are the risks we're going to take to defend, protect, shelter, or deliver? And sometimes this starts at home with those closest to us. Sometimes it starts with looking to the margins at a cause that's pulling at us. And sometimes it starts with reaching out with Ahava to someone who challenges us. The mystery of God is that Ahava shows up in lots of places. So I imagine what this Christmas movie would look like. Perhaps it would look like a young woman whose partner doesn't understand all the details, but decides to believe her and stand by her for the journey. Perhaps it would look like immigrants being welcomed in instead of forced to sleep in dire conditions with their children. Perhaps it would look like listening to the poorest and most disadvantaged in society about what they saw and heard and need. Perhaps it would look like powerful rulers humbling themselves to share gifts and resources. Perhaps it would look like consulting the wisdoms of those who live life and think differently than us. Perhaps it would look like governments resisting paranoia and providing for everyone. That movie probably wouldn't get very good reviews, but it would be an epic love story. Amen.